my name is Marissa Syed, and I'm going to be the second host. Today's guest answering questions will be State Senator Jason Pizzo.
So the way today's town hall will work is that me and Marissa will be asking questions to our guest, and then some of them will be asked by you at home. And if any more questions come up, please feel free to use the chat.
Florida State Senator Pizzo has been in the Florida Senate since 2018, representing District 38 in Miami-Dade County. He is the chair of Criminal Justice Committee, and he is on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Criminal and Civil Justice, as well as others. In 2021, he has introduced a variety of bills, including S1114, which provides compensation for eligible victims of wrongful incarceration, and he has co-introduced S836, which deals with gun violence reduction. Thank you for joining us today, Senator Pizzo.
Thank you for having me. Actually, you're going to see that I'm sharing a headset right now with a friend of mine. This is Katie. And Katie, you guys can Google this while we're doing this. Katie works with Reform Alliance. I think you're the political or state director for Florida, right? Mm-hmm. So if you haven't heard of Reform Alliance, it's, you guys know who Van Jones is? He's on CNN.
I'm not aware of him, but Katie.
So Katie actually had a Zoom tonight we did with the League of Women Voters on very similar topics. So I invited her over to the house that we're renting here in Tallahassee at the Capitol before we begin session. And I was like, hold on, stay for dinner. And I have an 8:30 with a bunch of really engaged young minds. And so these are like the exact same topics that we talked about with like 70-year-olds today.
Yes,
yeah,
mostly.
Yeah, mostly 70-year-olds.
Students can join for free. Yeah, you guys can join the league for free if you'd like your
exactly.
to skew the average a little younger.
So the League of Women Voters is actually a real nonpartisan group that will, give treatment and address and do studies on ballot proposals, things that are on the ballot. Like Amendment 4 was big, obviously, minimum wage, legalizing marijuana, all of these things in a nonpartisan fashion. So Katie was here, so I was like, listen, stay, so join us.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thanks, awesome to be here. It's so great to see the younger folks that are approaching or maybe just hit voting age to be super engaged. I think voter participation is so important. So thank you guys for caring and especially about criminal justice reform, which Reform Alliance is uniquely focused on supervision reform, so parole and probation. But I am wearing my Day of Empathy shirt. That's next week on the 2nd of March. I'd be happy to send along to Senator Pizzo. I planned on it anyway. The details of those virtual events going on around the nation, that's for folks that are behind bars, and you certainly really is the expert or one of it. So I'll let him take it from here, but happy to answer any questions you have specifically for Reform Alliance.
Thank you. We look forward to learning more about Reform Alliance, and we'll definitely research it more now. So I guess our first question is regarding the Breathal Act. Marissa, do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah. So the Breathal Act is a multifaceted act that means to address problems in the criminal justice system, including ending the 3 strikes law, raising the age of criminal liability to 24 years, abolishing the death penalty, putting restrictions on prison labor, and more. Senator, what are your thoughts on the Breathal Act, and how can it be implemented in Florida?
In parts, and unfortunately incrementally, because of just the reality of trying to, let's walk over here. We actually have a couple other people here too, so we're gonna walk over here. 1 second. Okay. Apologize. Okay, so we're gonna switch again. There we go. All right. So great question. And what I would say is, let's get another light here. Okay. So what I would say is somewhat incrementally, we have, in a sort of in a hurry up situation where for years, a lot of legislators kind of on both sides actually were really resistant to any kind of substantive change as it relates to incarceration. When people run for elected office, some component of what they're running on forever whether they're Democrat, Republican, NPA, whatever, has been about public safety and, you know, in the street, so to speak, or at schools. And so people have been very sensitive to it. It's only lately that we really have the data and we have the science to show what reduces recidivism, right? What reduces the likelihood of propensity for someone to reoffend and go back. It's not even science anymore. It's just objective, plain thought. You know, when people have connections or a nexus back to society, when they have a vocation or education or a job prospect or reintegrated, you know, with family and a support network and people in industries who care, the likelihood of reoffending just precipitously drops down, right? I mean, you know, people always ask me, what's your motivation? You work so hard and you do so much. And I go, my kids, I want my kids to be proud of me, right? So I'm a big, huge supporter of things like children of inmates, where, you know, the children out there who have parents, mother or father, you know, who are incarcerated or, you know, going through that, they remain in contact and we foster that relationship. It gives both sides something to look forward to, some sense of purpose and pride and accountability. So I say incrementally on those 4 components that you just mentioned. As it relates sort of to the 3 strike situation we have in Florida, we don't even have 3 strikes in Florida. We have 2 strikes, okay? So our office is made up of me, Maggie, we were prosecutors together. So we live this life every day, 100 hours a week. We handle shootings and homicides. And we had a young woman who came to us recently. You can tell me to shut up at any point if my anecdotes and my stories are like, you know, off track, but
No, not at all.
just like throw up a hand or something. But we had a young woman that came to us recently that's like, listen, a young woman that came to us recently, she's like, hey, and she walks in her office and she's got an ankle monitor on and everything. So we know that she's either on probation or community control or pending trial. And she's like, listen, I was told to come here. I was told, like, you know, you guys make things happen and, you know, just to tell you my story and see if there's anything you can do. No promises, no assurances, you know. So like, yeah, what's up? And Maggie, my chief of staff, who was a prosecutor with me, is like smirking from the beginning. And I'm like, well, why is Maggie like smirking the whole time? So this young woman goes into this story about how she was brutally molested as a young child, okay, from 2 family members, 2 men in her family. She never got treatment, and she sort of acted out or, you know, emoted through doing things and hanging out with the wrong crowd. Well, that wrong crowd one night ends up being 3 other guys that she's with, and they end up like burglarizing a house. And one of the kids that she's with all of a sudden that becomes armed burglary, which is a very serious charge. And it can attach sort of to everybody that's involved. So she gets arrested. She's charged with, you know, any number of the prosecutor, okay? And it says my Wi-Fi is glitching out a bit. Can you guys hear me okay or no?
It's cutting in and out. Now it's better, but
okay. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So she's in her office and, you know, she's explaining, listen, I was on probation. I never got treatment for what the underlying issue was. I ended up reoffending with like a drug charge, like marijuana possession. So that violated her probation from the original charge. The prosecutor gave her yet another opportunity not to like send her away to prison on the underlying charge, to try to get some help. She never ended up getting the help. She violated probation again. Nothing violent, nothing crazy. But she's like, listen, I don't want to be on probation anymore. I don't want the responsibility. I don't want to do the reporting and the urine tests and all this and all that. She's like, you know what? I'll just serve out the rest of my time in prison. What will you offer me? So the prosecutor gave her something like pretty fair, you know, considering. She serves a prison term. She comes out. About a year and a half later, she's like having almost like an emotional seizure, like an episode, and just like sort of crying out. She ends up going into a vacant home. The police find her because the neighbors report a break-in. And when the police come, she's wrapped around the drapes of like the living room drapes that come down from the window treatments. Like that's a call for help, like in a fetal position on the floor, right? That's not like your violent, you know, whatever. Well, because she committed a burglary, a year and a half after she had just finished serving her prison term, that's called PRR, prison release reoffending. So she was automatically, the offer from the state attorney's office, because of reoffending so close together, not 3 strikes, 2, 30 years in state prison. And they weren't budging. And the judge could not use any type of discretion to waive anything, to lessen it, to lower it. It's all in the state attorney's office. And to have uniformity in the laws and to treat everyone equally, awful sometimes. The state's offer was 30 years in state prison. They didn't have to. Now, this is what's important. This is where the law school stuff comes in. They don't have to prove the new charges. That's a brand new trial. They just get to basically prove the fact they hand to the jury certified stamped copies of her prior conviction to show that she had committed that one. And if she's found guilty of committing this one, see you later, it's 30 years. And that's the offer, and they weren't budgeting. So we intervened. The reason why Maggie in my office was smirking the whole time is because Maggie was the first prosecutor that she had that gave her those 3 chances. Small world.
Yeah.
So we meet. So yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just saying that was crazy. So what ended up happening with the woman?
She's going to serve 10 months
And
instead of 30 years.
That's because of you and Maggie?
That's because I told the state attorney that if she doesn't lower it to something reasonable, that I will not like her anymore. And apparently at this stage of my career, not liking somebody means something. So
I also think it's worth noting that she was willing to serve more time rather than continually be supervised, which, people think parole and probation is a win and a great thing, and that's better than being behind bars. Arguably, depending on your situation, sometimes it's not. And it's very easy to have what you referred to before as a technical violation. Meek Mill, if you guys are familiar, he's really he's on our board, and he's who founded with Van Jones because of his story of technical violations. And if you guys are familiar with Free Meek, there's a really awesome Amazon Prime series about it. Check it out. It's 5 parts, and it's really about the injustice of supervision and how easy it is to, even when you're out, you're still in, and how long and sometimes ridiculous those other sentences can be. So certainly explore parole and probation as well when we're talking about criminal justice reform as a very awesome example that she would prefer to serve more time behind bars than be continually supervised.
The biggest tragedy in the whole thing, though, is not everybody has the cell phone number for their state senator, and that or nor does that person really want to get involved or know this space. So there's only a few of us. Sorry, hold on, we lost her. So we have some people over, and I'm going to show you who's here. Make sure you. What's that?
You want to take this back?
Oh, you got it? Yeah. Okay. I'll take this back.
When you're gonna walk.
So I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me? All right. So like I said, we're up in. Turn this off. We're up in Tallahassee, and it's serendipitous that we're talking about this. And I apologize. I'm going to step outside for a second, tell you who's here, and then I'll introduce you. So tonight I made dinner for some guests that were coming over the house that we're renting. So inside the house right now is the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, who is in charge of all of the prisons in Florida. So you guys can ask him a question if you want. Oh, and then also Sean Hopwood, who's like a world famous attorney. You guys should Google who that is. Bala, you're nodding your head like I think you know who it is already. And then Senator Jeff Brandis is also here, who's actually a Republican, but nobody is more at the forefront of criminal justice reform than Senator Brandis. So.
Yeah, that's great. We are bipartisan, but all that we need, all that we want is, I guess, an initiative for reform on both sides. So it's important.
Absolutely. So Senator Brandis and I are working on it. And I was the one tasked with cooking tonight up here at the house. So that's why I think my screen's a little, hold on. I think we burned some stuff. Hold on. Okay. That's better. All right.
Great. So expanding more on the 3 strikes law, like we talked about before, the Clean Slate Act is a national bipartisan coalition advancing policies to automatically clear eligible criminal records across the United States. And that's based a lot on the 3 strikes law and how in most of the United States, 3 strikes and you're pretty much out. But here in Florida, as Senator Pizzo said, it's 2 strikes. It has already been signed into Pennsylvania and Michigan. Is this Clean Slate Act being considered to be implemented in Florida? And if it isn't, why not? Why do you think?
So because we live in a let me give you a perfect example. So the Florida statute on the criminal justice system, it says its main lead mission statement sentence is that the Florida criminal justice system's primary focus or primary intention is to punish.
It says that? It says that
Yes.
it's meant to punish? Well,
Yes, to punish. It does, and then it says and then it says comma basically, while rehabilitation is an aim or a goal, it does not supplant the primary purpose of punishment.
that's not
So
right.
I filed a bill this year that just changes the word punishment to public safety. Now, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, and I had to get a House sponsor, and they're like, but I want to do a big bill. I go, this is a big bill. It's just taking one word out and putting 2 for public safety, but public safety is different than punishment, right? If you could guarantee society that a 15-minute tough conversation with somebody and it'll resonate, not to repeat or reoffend, and to appreciate the gravity of what they did and the severity of what they did, and then to reenter society in a productive fashion where you're not going to recidivate or reoffend, wouldn't you take that? And the answer is yes. So when you talk about public safety versus punishment, can be in perpetuity, but public safety is as soon as you're sure that you're using best practices, basically to give the best possible chance you have to somebody not to reoffend. What do those things include? Education, vocation, keeping ties and that connection with the community and their family is critically important. The reading grade levels of inmates is staggeringly low. So even just getting GEDs and then getting higher education is so critically important. And most people, even victims in crimes, are not focused on punishment. They're just focused on, does the person appreciate what they did? How can this particular case serve as a cautionary tale or a lesson for it not to happen again? And what are we doing so other people don't fall victim the way I did? Like, why did this person commit this crime? That's what victims always wanted to know. It wasn't about like sending them away forever. It was about, what can we possibly do so this person and other people like this don't do it again? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So basically just trying to reduce the recidivism rate, like you said, and just trying to reintegrate prisoners back into society.
Right. And not come back.
So Marissa, I think actually had a question based on that.
Yeah, I had a question. That was what I was planning on to go into next. So we've also worked to rehabilitate with other organizations like the National Juvenile Justice Network. What steps are being taken for former inmates to be reintegrated into society? Because according to the Congressional Research Service, a study showed that within 5 years of release, nearly 3/4 of ex-offenders released in 2005 came back into contact with the criminal justice system, and more than half returned to prison after either being convicted for a new crime or violating the conditions.
Up until about 2 years ago, all we gave inmates was $50 and a bus pass when they left. That's it. We didn't give them an edge. The fact that over and over, the United States sits as like the highest incarceration rate in the world, right? 700 per 100,000, and the next 4 countries are unsavory places that none of us would want to live. Okay, not exactly bastions and poster nations of freedom, right? So why do we have such a high incarceration rate? Well, somebody asked me one time in a different aspect. They're like, how can we lower crime rates? I go, put everybody in jail. They're like, what? I'm like, if everybody was in jail, there'd be no crime. But then again, there'd be no community, there'd be no society, there'd be nothing. So let's start like releasing people and releasing the idea of what do we have to do at each stage with each different sort of demographic or type or class, whatever, to make sure that they are properly situated and equipped not to have to resort to crime. And if you don't think that on a state by state basis, spending less on education just for the general public won't result in more crime, or spending less on mental health services won't result in more crime, then you're kidding yourself. So states that spend a lot on lowering the ratio of, council, you guys are all Florida, right? Are you Florida? Who's in Florida?
I'm in Florida. We're a national organization, though.
Okay, Valley,
Yeah.
in public schools in Florida, there's only one counselor for every 486 public school students. Marissa, where are you?
New Jersey.
Okay, where in New Jersey?
Hudson County, Jersey City.
Okay, I know it. I know all 563 municipalities in New Jersey. I'm originally from New Jersey as well, from Somerset County. Okay,
Yeah,
now
I saw researching you.
every city has their own school board, basically in New Jersey, their own police department, their own school board. But in New Jersey, your parents are paying state income tax, which Florida doesn't have an income tax. Now, to bend over backwards to incentivize businesses and industries to come to Florida, you do so at some expense. You're giving something up by being so inexpensive, right? So New Jersey spends about 3 times per student. So Marissa, your 10th grade cost, 2 to 3 times more to the state budget than Vale's did in Florida. All my nieces and nephews are in New Jersey. 2 to 3 times more is spent per each kid in New Jersey than spent in Florida. And if you're not equipping and granting the necessary resources to get kids ahead or keep them ahead, that's what happens. Now, there's pockets in every state where you see an exacerbation of these issues. Marissa, in the city of Irvington, for instance, right? A lot of crime, a lot of shooting, outside of Newark area, Camden, some parts of Trenton, whatever, where the property tax rolls are low, where police spend more time on violent crime than they do community relations. But by and large, the amount of money and resources that are put into each student in the state of New Jersey, they have fewer excuses or fewer outlets to want to commit crime or a propensity to commit crime than a place like Florida. Just reality.
So that, I guess, has to probably do a lot with the school to prison pipeline as well. And I guess if less is being spent in the students in Florida, then they're more likely to commit crime. So what exactly do you think, as a state and you in the senator's office, like what are your plans to reduce the school to prison pipeline?
So we're taking sort of a bookended approach. And what I mean by that is, when you have a row of books and you have bookends. So on the first part, we're really pushing for more sealing and expunging and automatic sealing and expunging for juvenile crimes, and actually giving like a second chance. Because a lot of times if kids commit something at 15, your parents in Florida will go to seek to seal or expunge it in advance of like an application for something, either their own or your school or college application. But then like all of a sudden you get, I don't know, arrested for weed or something like that when you're 17. Maybe that's the one you wanted off your record, not the one that your parents, pushed for, whatever. So we're moving. There's a bunch of bills on Republican and Democratic side to increase sealing and expunging availability. So that's the one side of the bookend. The other bookend, we want 75-year-olds who committed nonviolent crimes to get the hell out of prison. Okay. It's like, what are they doing there? Like what purpose is that serving? They can't, so we want conditional releases, medical releases. We want compassionate releases. The governor here now, and the last governor we had, Rick Scott, and now Ron DeSantis, they're rather inflexible and tone deaf to, certain people that should just be given these releases. So it's not necessarily like the people that run the prisons. It's very often the executive branch, is the governor's office, that basically say, I'm not granting, clemency, or I'm not granting conditional release or compassionate release. 75-year-olds who have like marijuana charges from 30 years. I mean, this is so stupid. That goes back to public safety. Like, that's just punishment, right? It's punitive, it's draconian. What purpose is it serving? And I don't think Grandpa Joe, who's 77 years old in a prison for something he did 35 years ago that wasn't. Now, we have to be clear and authentic about a couple things. And even though I'm a Democrat and, part of the liberal party, I guess you could say, I'm still a former prosecutor and I'm still a dad. Okay. If you hurt a kid or assault a kid sexually or something like that, I'm sorry. You're not on the top of my list of people that I'm looking to help right away.
Yeah, that makes sense. There has to be some boundaries and,
Yeah.
certain
Right.
rules and ways.
But somebody who committed 5 armed robberies, you can make an argument is more dangerous than someone that did something really bad once. Right? I mean, there are situations where kids are in neighborhoods and they may have stabbed somebody, they may have shot somebody, whatever, and it's horrible. And it's like, the top end of the extreme of violent. But if it's the only thing they ever did, does 4 or 5 seconds always or should always dictate the rest of your life? I don't know. Somebody who's committing, and there's so many inequities, and you guys know this, like somebody who commits a pattern of insurance fraud, defrauding the elderly out of their life savings for a pyramid scheme and does it for 10 years, is a really bad soul. That's the person like you need to be worried about. Now, they've gotten a pass. It's white collar crime. They typically get probation. They have the money to pay things back, and they're treated a lot differently and nicer because we associate that as sort of innocuous and less severe than things that are violent sometimes. And sometimes the violent things are once, and it's not animosity. There's a difference between shooting your wife and robbing a stranger once because you were starving or had to feed somebody. And I'm not excusing the behavior, and I prosecute people all the time for it. But if you guys have siblings and family members, there are situations where you might be in a really nice atmosphere, a really nice place. Your parents might have a lot of resources. Things might be great. You may have never wondered or worried about where your next meal is coming from or what you could buy or have or your next iPhone. But there are, especially this past year, really kind of exacerbated housing and food insecurity issues for a lot of people as well. So things, are horrible, but we need on a case-by-case basis to value each and every life and determine whether or not that particular act or series of acts really, dictates or demands that they spend, inordinate amount of time away. And of course, it's completely disparate and disproportional and discriminatory towards people of color, without question. I mean, this is something I talk about all the time, where, I don't mean to stereotype, but if Marissa gets arrested tonight in Jersey City, her mom and dad's going to have her out of custody in like 15 minutes. Okay. The family's going to get together. They're going to pool resources. Like, she's out. There are some kids, even in my district, who they get arrested at 17, 18 years old. They don't have anybody to call to bond them out with $500 or $1,000, but they want to get out. So when they're offered something like credit time served 1 day and everything's over, don't worry about it, you can go home, they don't realize the implications of raising their right hand and voluntarily taking a plea that will result in a felony conviction, which they get to go home that day, but they give up getting a student loan, a home loan, or a job. And then that creates and exacerbates the divide that begins there at that point. So if one of my kids were arrested, I'd have them out like soon, right? And we would, the case would drag on, witnesses would forget, or their memories would fade, or we try to get some sort of like pre-trial diversion offer. Some other people that just for a plea of convenience and realize they don't have the resources to push on with this might just take a plea and not realize when I was 18, I mean, I had every resource in the world. I wasn't smart enough to realize I didn't know what I didn't know.
So yeah, I guess it does really apply on a case-to-case basis, kind of like what you said about that woman who she was meant to serve 30 years because they were following the rules. And I guess that has to make a change, and it has to be more specific to each person instead of just following the rules,
Right.
For our next question, we wanted to talk about one of the bills you've introduced. It's the Compensation for Eligible Victims of Wrongful Incarceration bill. Can you tell us a little bit more about this bill and what is the goal of this bill?
You have a number of people, some people think it's as high as 10% of the prison population may be serving time for crimes they didn't commit. And money is not, money doesn't give them their time and their life back. But, you know, I'm not gonna even say it's the second best thing or the third best thing, but it's certainly you know, at least at the very least something decent that we can do to recognize that they've served time. And I take very seriously the fact that we have a number of, you know, our statute books are a couple thousand pages, and they deal with things from insurance to banking to counties and cities and charters and preemption and highways and speed limits and all kinds of things. But criminal justice in particular deals with your liberty and your freedom. So I take it very, very, very seriously. I wish my colleagues sometimes would take it more seriously and appreciate what we're doing. So that's why I try to educate them on these things. And so your liberty and your freedom, unless it's taken away, you don't sometimes appreciate how incredibly valuable it is. Now, anyone who's ever been convicted of a felony can't serve public office. So I know that none of my colleagues understand what it's like to lose your freedom, just per se, just by the nature of the fact that you know they haven't served time because they can't serve office if they have. So it seeks to compensate people on a monetary basis. Of course, we can't give them the most valuable thing, which is time.
Does it allow them to eventually serve public office, for example, like if they were wrongfully convicted?
I'm working on, you know, it's nobody likes incremental change on things, but I'm working on a whole host of the things that are taken away from people to be able to regain them if they've demonstrated. We had Amendment 4, which Valley, I'm sure you know about, which is returning citizens' rights restoration to people to be able to vote again, so long as they have not been convicted of a murder or sexual violent offense or sex offense, and they've completed their sentence. That restores their right to vote again. One of the other things that you lose is being able to serve in office. But one of the other things you also lose in Florida, if you're a convicted felon, is you can't own a firearm. Now, a lot of the same people who are pushing to return rights, voting rights, are huge proponents, obviously, of being able to restore the right to vote, not necessarily, you know, restoring the right to firearms. So we have to be careful sometimes when we push really hard for things that sometimes they have consequences. I could very well see some conservative lawmakers trying to push that people, oh, well, okay, if everybody have their rights back, then everybody should be able to carry firearms. I don't know if we mean to go that far. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it just depends, again, on a case-by-case basis, and it has to make sense for the most amount of people, but at the same time, you cannot leave a group of people out. So thank you for your answer to that question. Kind of switching gears now. COVID-19
is Katya trying to get on? I saw in the chat.
Let me see.
And we have Marie Etienne on here.
Yes, good evening, Senator. Marie Etienne is here. As you know, I support, we try to collaborate with Justice Project here. So we are excited that you are here this evening. I had invited Katya to be part of the panel this evening with you and share some insights. She's our Director of Governmental Affairs for Global Innovative Foundation. And
which means she's the powerful lobbyist that comes up here and makes things happen.
Well, on a volunteer side for us, she's there to help promote awareness about human trafficking, domestic violence, and gun violence.
Yep.
And so whatever, I know you're very huge on that. So whatever you can do to assist us to continue to raise awareness, we're here for you. Global Innovative Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Excellent. Here in North Miami Beach.
Gotcha. I just sent her a text.
Great.
Like, are you getting on this Zoom or what? So.
Thank you for joining us. So do you want to answer questions as well?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I guess kind of switching gears, we were also going to ask about COVID-19 and how it disproportionately affects people in prison. So what steps are being taken to mitigate these effects, and how exactly has it affected people in prison? And
The secretary for the Department of Corrections has been pushing and trying very, very hard to get vaccinations for the inmates, even the ones that are 65 and over. And this governor is not receptive. It's really an awful thing. And you'll hear more about it. So what I've done past couple of weeks is I put up a challenge for legislators.
I think he left by accident, or the Wi-Fi went out.
Yeah, it seems so. We can wait until he rejoins. And for those of you guys who are waiting, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And he is rejoining right now.
Okay, I'm back on, but I can't start video.
I think you should be able to start it now.
All right, there we go. Okay, it just dropped off for some reason. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay, all right. So yeah, on the inmate front, Secretary Inch, who I speak to on a very regular basis, has had a really impossible time trying to get the executive branch, his boss, the governor, on board to do so. He thinks he's close, but not there yet. So this is where you get a pretty objective assessment of how people value lives, right? So I filed bills as it relates to urban gun violence that maybe Marie has heard about, where, you know, I know you guys all know about tragedies like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in Parkland, where 14 teenagers were killed. And I've said this, I don't know how many times before, but, you know, 18 or 19 kids a year under 18 years old are killed in Miami-Dade County from gun violence 11, 12 years in a row. There's no marches or rallies for them, because these shootings and homicides take place in like places like Overtown and Little Haiti, you know, in Liberty City. And we don't have marches and rallies. We don't have special sessions. We don't come up with $400 million to change laws and things like that. So those are one of the main reasons why I ran, was to call attention to that. The mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers of these kids whose lives are lost did not love them any less than the parents at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas loved their kids that were lost. You know, I mean, call it out. Where the hell's the justice? So when I look at like the prison situation, where the 65 and over or the comorbidity, you know, cases that would otherwise be eligible or sensitive to it are not getting vaccinated, it there's an old Latin term that says res ipsa loquitur, which means the thing speaks for itself. It speaks for itself how the majority or leadership values life. That, you know, they'll set up a Publix, a CVS, and a Walgreens for everybody else, but not for inmates. Now, it's not only telling about how they're not, or how they're discounting the value of those lives that are in custody, but a lot of those people are going to get out one day. And one of the things I fought for the first year and second year that I was in the Senate was fulfilling part of what I call the social contract. So even though I was a prosecutor, I was the one that filed the bill to provide tampons and feminine hygiene products to female inmates. And this last year, not shackling pregnant inmates behind the back in case they should fall forward, not being placed in solitary confinement so they don't have to give birth by themselves in solitary confinement without medical attention. And there's a certain sense of authenticity that attaches, because I was a prosecutor. So people are like, oh, he's a law and order guy. If he's saying this must be serious. And I even said, listen, some of the people serving that will benefit from this, I might have prosecuted. But if we really, really want public safety and expect rehabilitation and don't want people to recidivate and reoffend, then we have to fulfill our part of the social contract to show that we value their life, so that we hope that they value ours when they come out, and their own. And when you have people that are maybe serving 5 more months, 5 more days, 5 more years, or a life, and you're not vaccinating them, you're saying, I don't care about your life. That's what you're saying. When you let people fly in from Argentina or New York to get vaccinated, but not the people who are captive in an, at a particular facility, that's unfair, and it speaks for itself.
Yeah. Thanks for your answer.
That's Senator Jeff Brandis.
Hello.
So
Hi.
Senator Brandis is actually the chair of judiciary. So anything related to criminal justice will go through our committee, my committee. They made him the vice chair of my committee, so I don't screw up. And then you'll go to criminal justice appropriations, which is like money to pay for things, but it always has to pass through judiciary. Now, here's the interesting thing. Not only is he like 6 inches taller than I am, but talk about bipartisan, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. But we're like on the same page about public safety, not punishment, about valuing the life of everybody so they value yours, and and treating people with respect. So you can ask of them. Katya's on.
Katya, hi.
Hi.
Show her who we're having dinner with.
Should we walk in and show him?
She should say, have Sean say hi to.
Okay.
Hey, this looks like a
So-
gubernatorial ticket to me.
It looks like a gubernatorial. So Jeff Brandis, can you tell these young women real fast who Sean Hopwood is? He's a Georgetown law professor, very famous guy, attorney. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
So this is Sean Hopwood. You guys all have to Google him later and be like, oh my God, I can't believe that. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this is like the real deal. And this is a young group doing an awesome thing. They're pushing for criminal justice reform,
Awesome.
reintegration to lower recidivism.
I'm just a law professor from Georgetown that nobody should pay any attention to.
He's full of shit. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Well,
Did you get something to eat?
I did.
I had to make dinner tonight. Katya, this is
I was giving Mark Inch telling him how hilarious it was that his staff was paying me for coming down here, and they were giving me their credit card info, and I told their staff, like, probably shouldn't be giving ex-bank robbers credit card info over the internet, but
all right. So
they somehow managed to trust me.
So Katya, you'll have to explain to everybody what kind of treat they're being given tonight. So it's me and Brandis here. We have Sean Hopwood, and then they've been asking a lot of questions about, about inmates and inmate population, about the vaccination and all that stuff. So I actually, inside here behind the door, we have Secretary Inch from the Department of Corrections, the secretary over prison. So Katya's like, oh my God, I can't believe that. So let's go inside.
Yeah,
Come here. Hold on.
This
This
is
is like
so cool.
This is better than Oprah.
This is
I don't have a car to give away, but hold on. So that's Secretary Inch, and he's talking to my son Jack about what he does.
Yeah,
So these are some of the high school people.
I'm doing a Scared Straight program with the senator's
Yeah,
son.
exactly. So these are, important conversations to have. It's not along party lines. It doesn't have to be so, black and white, old and young, whatever. It's just have real conversations.
Mhm.
Now, have real and Katya will tell you about this. It's probably you could not have any better mentor that will tell you about the nuts and bolts and behind the scenes and how we call it how the sausage is made. But I give everybody like one strike, sometimes two strikes. I go to them individually and talk to them about something that they're proposing in a bill or something I'm proposing in a bill. And if I'm following my gut, which I always encourage everyone to do, follow your instincts, and they're just not seeing it, well, then I've done my part. I need to move on. And if that means rolling over them and not with them, then you have to. If you're trying to get to the right place to do the right thing for people. I get a lot of resistance from people that you would think that would know certain subjects better than I should. And what I mean by that is I have people even in my own district who serve in very high positions who sometimes just sell fear to get reelected or say they have the answer or they own that space. And it's uncomfortable for people when someone like me spends 100 hours a week just trying to work on improving the lives of kids who don't look like me. And it irks and bothers people if they do look like them and they haven't gotten anything done. And I try to be nice and I try to be sincere and kind and inclusive. But if you're part of the problem, then you need to move out of the way or we're going to roll over you. And that's okay. Like that's important. There's a weird dynamic that you guys, if you don't already know already, you'll learn, which is sometimes the people like from your hometown, like real close to you, don't necessarily want you to become an all-star. Do you know what I mean by that? It's not always about like, oh, the hometown girl. That's not really always the case. And because there's envy and jealousy sometimes, and people think there's a finite amount of resources, there's not enough to go around, and they kind of like, so sometimes it's easier. So it actually would have been easier for me to run where I'm from in New Jersey. But, and I didn't have any family down here in Florida when I came down here years ago. I didn't have any cousins. I wasn't part of a legacy. I wasn't somebody's important grandson. I was just me. And it was really inconvenient and uncomfortable for a lot of people who had been here for a long time. You're like, yo, why is the white guy from New Jersey here in our neighborhood in Liberty City at 3 o'clock in the morning knocking on everyone's door trying to find a killer? Like, who is this guy? He must be crazy. A little bit. But that's okay. Because, you know, anyway,
That's really
people should be and are less partisan if you can get them one-on-one sometimes. Give them a chance. Except for our governor.
Yeah, I'm not supposed to say anything, but
Okay.
we've also had Katia St. Fleur join us. Would you like to introduce yourself, and do you have any questions?
Hey, yeah, I'm Katia St. Fleur. I am a governmental affairs specialist. I also serve on the board of Global Innovative, and I love this conversation. I had to hop off for a brief second, so I saw the beginning of the conversation, and I really kind of want to pivot on something Senator Pizzo said, and kind of not just because he's also my senator, but because we do need to relook and reframe how elected officials do government, right? In order to be effective, it can't be that if you are in one party or you're in another party that we do things for bylines. We have to do things to be effective. We can't do things because we want attention, because people elect the folks who go to Tallahassee to do a very important job. And too often, which is why what you guys are doing is so important, is no one's paying attention, right? No one's paying attention at all. And turkey drives and book bag drives are fantastic. But at the end of the day, they don't solve the problems that we have. And
that's
being
like
able,
right on point. That's not my job is not turkeys and giveaways, and people get angry at me that I don't do ribbon cuttings and turkeys, but I'm improving maybe your lives and your grandkids' lives, you know, setting things in motion. But go ahead. Sorry. I'm so happy you said that.
Being able to have a relationship with a Jeff Brandis, having the director of the Department of Corrections there to have conversations. This is what work looks like. And this is what it looks like. And this is what we need to use as a framework on how we hold folks accountable, guys. And once we've seen it, I like to tell people good, bad, and indifferent. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, right? So now that we have an example of what bipartisanship really looks like, and what it looks like is folks who are elected that say this is above me, this is above party line, this is more important than getting my picture in the paper, this is more important than having a quotable moment on social media for people to share. What's important is that folks who are in jail can get access to maxi pads, can get access to what they need. And we need to pay attention. And I love that you guys are asking great questions, because we really do have to find and make sure that once we know that our elected officials aren't being this productive, aren't doing and building the relationships that they need to build, we got to get folks voted out. I mean, I'm not pro or con any one particular person or any particular party, but it's just really about effectiveness, right? I've spent now well over a decade in Tallahassee, and I've done the grunt work. I've worked for an elected official. I've gone and gotten coffee, donuts, you name it. I've done it. I've been there. I've seen it. And I love to see Senator Pizzo and Brandis together, because seeing that together to me gives us hope that things can get done, right? People are willing to listen to each other. And we see it from DC, local government, to Tallahassee. But being able to say, regardless of party affiliation, these are the things that are important to me. Let's meet in the middle and let's make the lives of the folks in Florida better is the most important thing. And if people are elected and that's not the most important thing to them, get them out of office.
Yeah, I totally agree. We all agree. And that's
I'd vote for her.
I'd vote for her too, if I could vote. So we also had a chat from Marie, and I'm sorry we missed it. But yeah, you're right. It is very important for advocating for laws to protect Floridians. and in a world free of violence and crime. And like, I guess we just have to take our first steps. And I'm sorry that that happened to you, but I hope that we're making the correct steps. We only have 8 more minutes left. So I guess we're just gonna take one more question from the chat. So Anonymous asks, what are your thoughts on restorative justice? Do you think it is effective, and do you think it can be implemented? And feel free, either of you, to answer this.
Look, I think there's a lot of things we need to be doing. From top to bottom, it's the simplest things to do are elderly release and conditional medical release. Going up from there, we can move from 85 to 65% for nonviolent offenders. We could look at reclassifying drug crimes as misdemeanors instead of felonies for simple possession. But we have a laundry list of things the state needs to accomplish. But really, what we need to do overall is add grace to the system. My faith talks about justice, but it also talks a lot about mercy and grace, more about mercy and grace than justice. And so how do we add a little bit of that back into the thinking in Florida?
On the restorative justice part, my wife and I and my family have been victims of crimes, a couple serious ones. And by the time we got to the court process as victims standing in, we weren't seeking punishment. We were like seeking explanations and education. So we got robbed really badly one time of our quote unquote precious things. And my wife and I are both like, we don't want her to go away to prison. We want her to go to work and get a job. We had young kids come armed to my house, and it'd be like, the judge is like, oh, we should definitely file them as adults and send them to prison. I'm like, no, I want them. They tell me that they're going to enlist in the Army and get some responsibility or accountability. I'll sign off on it right now if they can appreciate what they did and they have an opportunity to do so. So it's that, the public safety aspect is always more important, like we talked about, than it is punishment. But on a restorative side, and we talked about this earlier, there's just some things that I got to be honest, I'm never going to be 100% like total kumbaya on, right? So I had a woman that called me Miss Fuhrer. There's a collection of women that come up here whose children or spouses or siblings are incarcerated, and Senator Brandis talks to all of them individually all the time, and I try to, but man, he's talked to hundreds over the years because he's been doing this a lot longer and really into this subject matter. But I'm on the phone with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and she's telling me about how she is completely forgiven the man who killed her daughter because her daughter was a drug addict and she was going through a bad time, and he was too, but she completely forgives him. And they've written a book together and they talk all the time. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like Googling the case while I'm talking to her, and she left out the part where the guy also killed her 6-year-old grandson brutally. I was like, I know Senator Brandis talks about mercy and grace, but like, there's nothing I wouldn't do to feed my children. I get it. I'm aware of limitations. We talk about late night because we hang out a lot. We talk about the death penalty and the inconsistency and how terrible the whole process is carried out, how it's its own sort of form of cruel and unusual, perhaps. But at the same time, if you harmed one of my children, I'd want to kill you. And I know that sounds inconsistent and hypocritical, but it's reconciling and finding a balance with those real emotions. And what we're very conscious of is not to try to make decisions based on what we think having pretty good lives, right? Having the whole family unit and not having to worry about where a kid's next meal is coming from or housing security. But we try to take into account what are the majority of people, or what are the least in society, so to speak, or the most underserved. What are they battling and dealing with and trying to negotiate on a daily basis? That's how people are supposed to legislate. Not for the people in the best position that this will never affect them, but for people who have it on a daily basis. And we don't get that a lot because, like Katya said, people come up here, I think they like freeze up, forget why they ran for office, why they came here, why they were sent here, why they were elected, and try to like fit in and hang out. And the message just doesn't resonate because they don't bring it with them. That's it. Thanks for having us.
Of course. So our last question is, okay, so as high schoolers applying to college, one of the participants wanted to ask how Professor Hopwood got into law. Yeah.
I went to undergrad at NYU for journalism. I went to Columbia for my master's degree. Katya and I were actually Harvard graduate students together a couple months ago. That I was like, I'm too busy, so I dropped out. But I didn't go to law school until I was 31. And I did it just for something to do. But this guy right here did not go to law school, but he served a lot of time like in the Middle East protecting our country, but knows just as much as you need to know. So if it's something that you have a hankering for that would make mom and dad or grandma proud, okay. But just think about where you want to go, what wrong you want to right, what thing that you're passionate about most, and reach out to people like us. We're accessible to try to make some suggestions, not dictate, but make some suggestions on how to get there. It doesn't necessarily have to be law school.
Focus on your relationships. It's all about, life is largely about relationships that you build. So you see tonight, over for dinner, we have Sean Hopwood, a convicted felon, bank robber, Georgetown law professor, the secretary of the Department of Corrections, the two of us. And, you know, it's building relationships.
Yeah, and we're excited to foster this relationship, you know, with you guys, and hopefully more in the future. So we'd love to have you guys on again to talk more in depth another time, but thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. And good luck explaining to your parents who the hell was on this call later.
All right.
But it's all good. Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Katya.
Great having you.